Hello everyone and welcome to another Advanced Warfare video. My name's Jay and today we're going to be talking all about frame-rounded fire rates. What are they? Why are they? How do they affect you? And how do you figure them out? So get out your calculators, boys. It's about to get technical. So the way Call of Duty does its gunfire is not to simulate a bullet leaving your chamber, traveling to a destination, and then hitting it. There is no bullet speed, there is no bullet delay, there is no travel time. Some weapons like the EPM3 have an animation of a bullet or a bolt traveling to a destination. However, the hit scan is simply the beginning of the frame after you pull the trigger. So you pull the trigger halfway between frames. At the start of the next frame, your hit will register with the game. So it's a very simple way of coding in gunfire. You don't have to worry about leading targets or bullet drop or anything like that like you can in something like Battlefield, which is more of a war simulation rather than an arcade shooter. Call of Duty is meant to be more simplistic, more of a reactionary game. And the problem with it is it creates an issue with the fire rates. Because let's say you have a weapon that is coded to fire 750 rounds per minute of sustained fire just holding down the trigger. Well, the way that's going to boil down is one bullet every 4.8 frames. The problem with that is that you cannot fire a bullet at 0.8 frames. So you're going to have to round it up to the next whole frame. So instead of firing at 4.8 frames per shot, you're going to fire at 5 frames per shot, and that's going to drop your rate of fire from 750 rounds per minute down to 720 rounds per minute. So the end result is, assuming that you're getting a full 60 frames per second, which is what consoles are supposed to get. We're not going to talk about frame rate drops or lag or stuff like that could affect it, but in an unpredictable way. Let's say that you have a perfect game that is running smoothly at 60 frames per second. You are never going to actually achieve the coded fire rate of the weapon you're using. It is always going to be rounded down so that you're firing one shot at the beginning of a frame rather than in the middle of a frame. So how then do you figure out what your actual rate of fire is? What's the formula? It's actually quite simple, really. Okay, don't worry, we'll talk about it. The first thing you want to do is figure out how many frames pass between each shot from the weapon you're using. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get online at many different various websites that have all of the fire rates listed for the guns you're using. And you're going to want to find what the coded rounds per minute fire rate is. And you're going to take that rounds per minute and you're going to divide it by 60 because there's 60 seconds in a minute. And that's going to give your coded rounds per second. Now, since there's 60 frames in a second, you're going to want to take 60 and divide it by your coded rounds per second fire rate, and that's going to give you your coded frames per second, probably something like 4.2, 4.8, 5.1, 3.9, something like that. It's going to be a decimal number, usually some kind of non-whole number. And what you're going to do is you're going to round that up to the nearest whole number. So if you get 3.5, you're going to round up to 4. If you get 4.8, round up to 5, etc. And that's going to be your frame-rounded frames per shot. Now, once you know how many frames are between each shot, you can start working your way back out to your actual rounds per minute fire rate. So what you're going to do is you're going to take 60, because there's 60 frames in a second, and divide it by your actual frames per shot. And that's going to give you your rounds per second fire rate in reality. Then, it's simple, since there's 60 seconds in a minute, you're going to take 60 multiplied by the actual rounds per second, and that's going to give you your actual rounds per minute fire rate. So now the question is raised, is this a big deal? Is this something you're going to notice? And the truth is, yes and no. There are times when you won't notice it. For example, 750 is the fire rate of the AK-12. It rounds down to 720, which really isn't that noticeable. You're not going to feel a difference between 750 and 720. However, especially in advanced warfare, this can be a pretty big deal. Take, for example, again, the AK-12, coded to fire 750 rounds per minute. Well, one of the most coveted and sought-after variants of the AK-12 is called the hair trigger, which is coded to fire at 857 rounds per minute, over 100 rounds per minute faster than the base AK-12, making it a very powerful version of the AK-12 and probably, statistically speaking, the best version of the AK-12. But when you run it through the formula, what you find is that the base AK-12 at 750 rounds per minute comes down to firing a shot every 4.8 frames, which rounds up, of course, to 5 frames between each shot. But then the hair trigger variant boils down to 4.2 frames between each shot, which again rounds up to 5 frames per shot. So the hair trigger, the one that everybody wants, the one that is supposed to be the best AK-12 in the game, ends up having the same fire rate as the base AK-12 and is actually a worse variant of the AK, because in the end it ends up having, you know, the same fire rate with plus 10% recoil added to it to try and even out that fire rate buff and make it a fair weapon. So the AK-12 itself is actually better than the hair trigger because of frame rounding. Now there are several other weapons that can do this. A couple that I have noticed are certain variants of the KF5 submachine gun, etc., that end up having the same fire rate as another variant, but because it's supposed to have a better fire rate, the game developers made it worse in other areas, like lower ADS time or lower hip fire spread or something like that, to try and make up for the added fire rate, which actually isn't even there. So if you're looking at a variant that has a higher fire rate, and that's what's so special about it, you might want to go ahead and figure out, are you actually getting a higher fire rate, or is the game just kind of messing with you because of its 60 frames per second-ness? Thanks for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really hope that this video was in some way helpful to you. I know that I recently started a series I'm going to be doing about top 5 lists, and one of the things I'm going to do during that series is talk about actual fire rates rather than the coded fire rates. So I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and put out a video explaining what I mean when I say frame rounded or actual or something like that, and then give a different number than the one that you saw online or heard in another video about fire rates. So that is the purpose of this video. I want to go ahead and say that I am not the guy who figured this out. I don't claim to be smart enough to figure all this out. I simply did all the research necessary and then gave it to you in a nice, convenient little package here to help explain future videos. So don't think that I'm stepping on anybody's toes or taking credit for something that I don't deserve credit for. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And until my next video, have a nice day, Charles.